Everybody, welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. We got a live Q&A for you today. Now, if you missed our show on Tuesday, I did a deep dive on the immune system and what types of supplements and nutrients you could take to overcome immune problems, colds, flus, etc. We also did a deep dive on the research published on the WHO's website on vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and the major role they play with immune function. So if you want to go back and check that out, if you haven't already watched it, I'd encourage you to do so, especially if you have any kind of paranoia or fear around the upcoming cold and flu season. But all that being said, today we're going to take your questions, try and take your questions on the immune system and on nutrition related to the immune system. So if you have those questions and you want to get them answered, go ahead and start typing that into the feed now, and I'll do my best to get as many questions answered today as we can. And if you are looking for support, don't forget this week we have our Ultra NAC formula. So if you watched Tuesday, we did a deep dive on N-acetylcysteine, which is one of the most powerful immune regulating nutrients you can take. And this week we have that on sale, no coupon code necessary. I'll put a link below this video for you to check out our NAC. So let's dive in. First question coming in, what's the dose of NAC? What dose of NAC do you want to use if you have major cold or flu? For an adult, 150 pounds or more, good dose to start with is 2,000 milligrams a day. You'd want to take that in split doses, so 1,000 early in the day and 1,000 late in the day as your dosing structure. Now you can go higher than that. Some people report, though, if they get up above 3,000 milligrams of NAC a day, it can cause upset stomach. So just be aware of that. If you're taking it and your stomach is getting upset, you can back it down. But 2,000 is a fantastic place for an adult to start. And it's also, NAC is safe for kids. So if you've got children under 150 pounds, 1,000 milligrams is a good place to start. If they weigh 75 pounds or more, anything under 75, I would start with 500 milligrams. So concern about quercetin in the kidneys. Cares that says, I like quercetin, but read that it's not good for the kidneys. There's no problem with quercetin in your kidneys unless you're just taking super mega doses of it indefinitely. But if you are taking it for a couple of weeks to help you, combat a cold or a flu, there's no problem or no fear you need to have over your kidneys in a general tone, as a general sense. Is a Babinski sign a form of, this is a very odd question from Alessandro, is a Babinski sign a form of arteriosclerosis or a transglutaminase 6 reaction? So Babinski sign is really not at all a form of arteriosclerosis per se. Now, what a Babinski is, those of you that don't know, when a doctor takes a sharp device or item and rubs it across the base of the foot from the back to the front, and then medially, that's a procedure where we're trying to elicit something called a Babinski sign. That's called a Babinski maneuver. And what that is a sign of, a positive Babinski sign would be a sign of something called an upper motor neuron lesion, which is basically means that there's a part of the nervous system in the upper aspect of the nervous system, not the peripheral nervous system, that has been damaged. So it's not really something we look at with arteriosclerosis unless you've had damage from a stroke, damage your brain or the motor cortex aspect of your brain creating that, but it's not by itself a vascular finding. And it's also not definitive at all for a transglutaminase 6 reaction, which is a type of antibody reaction we commonly see in people who have gluten sensitivity, where gluten is affecting their nervous system or their brains. So very, very unique question, but a good one. Okay, let's see here. If you're elderly with an autoimmune disease, should you take more of CD3 zinc to build up immunity to cold and flu? Yeah, so probably one of the biggest misconceptions with people in general is if they have an autoimmune disease, they've been told that you shouldn't use immune boosting nutrients because it can make the autoimmune disease worse. And that, I've never seen that be the case. And I've been practicing 22 years. Autoimmune disease is not exacerbated as a result of taking vitamins and minerals that support healthy immune function. Remember that vitamin C, zinc, and vitamin D have regulatory effects on the immune system. They don't make it stronger. They help it more appropriately. The better way to think about it would be these nutrients help your immune system understand how to better behave so that it's not overreacting, but also so that it's not underreacting. Think of it like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. You know, the porridge, it's too hot, it's too cold, or it's just right. We want your immune system to be just right. We don't want it to be overreactive. That's autoimmune disease. We don't want it to be underreactive. That's infection and ultimately cancer. So we want it to be regulated. And so think of vitamin C, D, and zinc as regulatory factors for immune function. Now, that being said, should you take more if you're trying to build an immunity, if you're trying to come into cold and flu season, is there benefit to using these things? And most of the evidence says yes. But the evidence really says who benefits are the people who have low levels. So if you're coming into cold and flu season, you have low levels of zinc, vitamin C, or D, you're going to benefit more than, say, somebody who doesn't have low levels. So how do you know whether you have low levels? You get tested. That's why I'm a huge advocate of testing instead of just guessing. Now, the other question is, so what if I don't test, right? What if my doctor refuses to test? Or what if I don't, what if my insurance won't cover the testing? Whatever the case might be, I'm not going to get a test done. Is there a danger to using vitamin D, zinc, or vitamin C in higher doses? The answer is no. There's not been one shred of scientific data or evidence that shows that when using supplements to boost or support immune system in reasonable doses, that anyone struggles with any kind of major consequence or side effect. I mean, of the three, vitamin D has the most potential to create a negative response, but that's generally only in people who have pre-existing kidney damage or kidney disease. So if you have been told you're a chronic kidney disease patient, before you embark on a higher dose vitamin D supplementation protocol, it is a good idea to talk to your doctor and clear it. It's also a good idea to make sure your doctor measures your vitamin D levels. Is it okay to have RO water taste bitter? I bought a countertop RO filtering unit about a month ago, but the water tastes bitter and I do not like it. I would suspect that your unit is pulling the minerals out, and so some people perceive that flavor, that taste, to almost taste somewhat bitter. It's because there's no alkalinity. There's no minerals that are alkalinizing the water, so it can taste a little bit more bitter or acidic. Try adding electrolytes to that water. So if you're filtering it, and you're again, with RO water, always look to add electrolyte back to it and see if that doesn't enhance or improve the taste back to what you might find typical. If you need a good electrolyte, you can check out our Ultra Electrolytes Alice. And the way that's done is you just take, for every 20 ounces of water, you just add a half a teaspoon of this liquid electrolyte formula into your water, and it remineralizes it again. You might find that it changes the taste back to more what you're used to. If that doesn't do it, you might call the manufacturer of that RO filter or look up their reviews and see if anyone else is complaining of something similar, because on the surface, to me, RO does taste more bitter if you're not used to drinking RO water because of the demineralization of the water. Someone recently told me that ascorbic acid turns to oxalate. I have not heard this before, but I started digging around. And of course, most of the mainstream websites have affirmed it, but I don't believe that it's true. Just want to get your opinion. It is true, but it's not true. So where a lot of that comes from, I think there've been like one or two studies, Emmy, that show that it can happen, but there was nothing confirmatory, and those research studies have not been like validated in any major way. They're theoretically overdosing on vitamin C, ascorbic acid, can generate oxalate, but it's very, very, I'll just say it like this. If you don't have an oxalate problem, then vitamin C is not going to be problematic for you. Now, if you do have an oxalate problem, you might reconsider using high doses of vitamin C over prolonged periods of time. And when I say high doses, I mean anything higher really than 1 gram per day has the potential to exacerbate a pre-existing oxalate condition, but by itself is not generally something that's going to cause somebody to have high oxalates. Okay, let's see. When I was taking Dexedrine, I lost a substantial amount of weight even though I was eating carbohydrates. How is that possible? Dexedrine inhibits appetite, so you probably, even though you were still eating carbs, you probably were eating less overall, and because of the appetite suppression that drug can cause. And so, you know, when you consume calories, you can lose weight. I mean, there's no magic to that. Why would my T4, my free T4, be low, and how can I raise it? Christine asks. So free T4 produced by your thyroid gland, we're talking about thyroid hormone, okay? The reason why a person might have a low T4, there are several actually, nutritional reasons why that can happen. Number one, magnesium deficiency. Number two, zinc deficiency. Number three, B12 deficiency. Number four, iodine deficiency. Number five, vitamin B2 deficiency. And number six, vitamin C deficiency. And some preliminary research, there's a number seven, right, which is inositol deficiency. So those nutrients, magnesium, zinc, B12, iodine, B2, vitamin C, and inositol, are known to contribute to lower free T4 and bound T4. Just the production of T4 is hindered when you lack those nutrients. Now, so those are nutritional deficit reasons why a person's free T4 might be low. There are also other reasons why free T4 might be low. One of the biggest dietary reasons is gluten. And we see this very, very frequently, where gluten contributes to a reduction of the body's ability to make T4. And so we'll see people developing hypothyroid, low thyroid, as a result of eating gluten. So you might also consider gluten as a factor if you haven't already. We have a quiz that people can take. It's free. I'll put a link below this commentary. But this quiz allows you to, it's a simple quiz you can take that gives you kind of a confirmation as to whether or not a gluten-free diet might be the right move for you to make. But very, very common. There's a lot of substantiated research around the gluten-free diet and going gluten-free and improving thyroid hormone function and production. What's best for seasonal allergies? And what month of the year should I start taking my allergy supplement? So two questions here. Well, my favorite formula is something called Histassist. And this is a mixture of different nutrients, including things like NAC and nettle and bromelain. These nutrients work synergistically to stabilize mast cells. Mast cells are the immune cells that release histamine. So, instead of taking antihistamines, which is what a lot of people opt to do, antihistamines block histamine, whereas Histassist supports the aggressive release of histamine. So it kind of stabilizes that, so you release less histamine than you would otherwise. And it works really, really well when you add that combination of nutrients. Whereas again, an antihistamine, like if you're talking about something like Benadryl or some of the other over-the-counter medicines, these guys suppress the immune system. And by blocking histamine, remember this too, that in order to make stomach acid, that requires histamine. So when you block histamine, when you take histamine blockers, you also reduce your stomach acid. Now, when you reduce stomach acid, you increase your risk for infection. You also cause malabsorption and maldigestion of many nutrients. So long-term use of histamine can cause malnutrition. You have to be careful with those kinds of medicines. Now, if we're talking about there's a week out of the year that you have a ragweed problem and you want to use an antihistamine, that's fine. I'm not talking about short-term use. I'm talking about people that have been told they have chronic allergies and they're popping antihistamine every day indefinitely for years on end or months on end even. But so that part one of the question is Histassist. That's what I recommend. Now, part two to the question, which is when should you start taking it? And that just depends on what you're allergic to. If we're talking about environmental allergens, you know, when do you have, what time of the year are you flaring? Because a lot of people with true environmental allergens, like to ragweed or to cedar, it depends on the time of the year. So the time that you would take it would, again, be dependent upon what you're allergic to. Now we're coming into October here pretty soon. You know, where I live in Zone 9 is ragweed is a major allergen down here in Texas. So I would start loading on it right now because you're about 2 weeks out for the ragweed to go sky high. So about 2 weeks before allergy season is a good time to load. If you're using Histassist, a loading dose is about 6 capsules a day. So you take 2 capsules 3 times a day. And then after that, once you've loaded, if you're just trying to stay preventative through the allergy season, take 2 capsules twice a day or 4 caps a day. Now you can also take more than that. You can take up to 8 a day should you have really aggressive allergies you're trying to support. But that's the general gist of it. So it's the timing depends on what you're allergic to. To support the immune system, do you take the Ultra Q and the NAC in addition to the multivitamin and omega? Yeah, you can. I mean, a multivitamin is a great way to support the immune system in a broad way. And of course, omega, most people don't get anywhere near enough omega-3 in their diets. But yeah, those are all things that can be taken in conjunction with one another without interference that can definitely support the immune system. I'm taking probiotics with Bifido and Lacto. Noticed difference in my bowel movements with celiac DH, no longer diarrhea and constipation. It's in between changed color. Should I go on with these probiotics? I would. It's very common for people with gluten sensitivity, celiac disease, DH, dermatitis, or pediformis to have a underrepresented microbiome, meaning their nutrient levels are definitely not nutrient, their probiotic levels are compromised. And we've seen this in a number of research studies that support that when people with a history of celiac or gluten issues take Bifidobacter or Lactobacillus, that their symptoms dramatically improve, even though they've already gone gluten-free, because a lot of them go gluten-free and they don't improve or they have minimal improvement. And then when they add the probiotic, their symptoms actually dramatically start to improve. So if you experience that, I would definitely encourage you to stay on it, at least for a time, a couple months. You know, probiotics are really inexpensive to take, and it sounds like it's altered your symptoms pretty dramatically, which is great news. Is there a suitable alternative for glutathione on the immune protocol? I have a sensitivity to grapefruit seed extract. So glutathione and grapefruit seed extract aren't the same thing, so I'm not quite sure I understand your question, because glutathione is not derived from grapefruit seed extract, so you should be able to take that. But if you're asking if there's something else just beyond that, you know, is there a supplemental, instead of taking glutathione, can you do something else to build glutathione or in lieu of glutathione? Yeah, N-acetylcysteine, NAC, which is also on the immune protocol. But another nutrient that can regenerate glutathione, which very much helps the liver produce glutathione, is alpha-lipoic acid, as well as selenium and vitamin E. So those 3 nutrients have the potential to really help to regenerate glutathione. Are supplements better absorbed on an empty stomach or with food? Depends. Generally speaking, they're absorbed just fine with food. The thing about taking certain supplements on an empty stomach is some supplements for some people can cause nausea. So on an empty stomach, this is especially true of nutrients like iron and zinc. On an empty stomach can definitely, people report upset stomach. So taking those with food is probably a really good idea. Now, that being said, lots of people take vitamin C on an empty stomach and do just fine. NAC, you can do okay with NAC on an empty stomach and do just fine, as well as many other nutrients. But iron and zinc would be 2, I would say definitely don't take those on an empty stomach. Everything else, it just depends. And there's not a benefit one way or the other to taking something with food versus not taking it with food. Can a functional integrative chiropractor make any improvement to scoliosis and kyphosis? I already follow No Grain, No Pain 100%, almost 2 years. Yes. I tell you what, I've seen some really amazing scoliotic improvements from some chiropractors. So I would definitely say it's worth a shot, especially if you struggle with a pretty severe scoliotic curve. You know, anything over 10 degrees, you can create a lot of chronicity of back pain and imbalance that, you know, a good chiropractor who's addressing postural muscles, not just somebody who adjusts your spine repetitively over a period of time, but somebody who's really addressing the strength and imbalance issues, so that with any good scoliosis program, there should be an exercise aspect to that program. So I would just say, you know, if you're looking at making a decision about seeing a chiropractor, just make sure that any scoliosis plan that you're following, it needs to come with exercises, with a plan, because chiropractic manipulation is a fantastic tool and it can do wondrous things. But it's also a passive therapy, meaning that the chiropractor provides the adjustment to the body, but you have to prep the body to receive the adjustment so that the adjustment doesn't, so it holds. Because if your muscles are tight or imbalanced, you can get an adjustment, but a day later, that adjustment's going to go right back out and you're going to need another one. So if you're doing the rehab along with it, it can work tremendously well. Is white pea gluten-free? Yes, it is. Are tofu, miso, tamari, and hummus off limits? I've cut them out for 2 years. They are if you're generically following No Grain, No Pain. So like we cut out any kind of legume or bean in No Grain, No Pain diet simply because legumes are generally very challenging to digest. And so if you're trying to overcome years of digestive damage from gluten, then we don't want to put difficult to digest things into the diet. Now, that being said, you know, when I work with people one-on-one, I don't necessarily always keep them off of legumes and beans. We actually try to get some of that reintroduced, but that comes later. That usually comes after 6 months of strict adherence. But it also might apply to that individual if they're reactive to it, because we also test for food sensitivity. So if if they have a reaction specifically to a certain kind of bean or legume, we certainly don't want them eating that either. What vitamin is required for mouth ulcers, or what deficiency can cause this? So the B vitamin complex, Cam, can contribute to an increased risk for mouth blisters and ulcers. But one of the things at the first sign of a fever blister or mouth ulcer, one of the things that you really should focus on, actually two, is a combination of vitamin C and an amino acid called lysine, L-lysine, L-Y-S-I-N-E. I have a product called Virid, V-I-R-I-D, and that product has both those ingredients, and it's really designed to support people who are having those types of outbreaks. So I would encourage you to check that out and use that as a tool. Now, the other thing we know that causes a lot of mouth ulceration is gluten. There have been a number of studies showing this, and I've seen this clinically for years, of people come in to see me, and one of their primary historical problems is mouth ulcers, aphthous ulcers, blisters, fever blisters around the lips or even inside the mouth. And when we change their diets, it's like those things almost go away overnight. They just quit happening. So if you're not gluten-free, you might, again, consider taking the quiz. I put a link up below. Or consider getting tested for gluten sensitivity to determine whether or not that diet is going to help you move in the right direction. Do I recommend eating algae? Not really. I mean, a person can. There are some nutrients in algae that can be beneficial, but as a general rule of thumb, I don't put algae at the top of my list of top nutritional things you need to focus on. Well, that Joyce says, I'm anxiously awaiting results of your nutrition tests. So curious. I'm excited that you did that, Joyce, and I hope you find a lot of very helpful deficits that you can work on. Can we take NAC continuously or take breaks from it? No, I mean, you can take it continuously provided you tolerate it. I haven't seen anyone who doesn't really tolerate NAC long term. I mean, I haven't seen anybody do any kind of damage to themselves. Again, we use NAC very, very regularly in my practice. What should one take for an enema? I think the bigger question is, does one need an enema? You know, if you're wanting to do an enema, what's the premise of doing the enema? I mean, I know why people do enemas, but Julia, maybe elaborate on your question, because you know, coffee enemas, you know, are a thing that can be very, very effective for helping, especially somebody going through like a detoxification protocol. But do you need to do enemas every day? Because I see some people that get like almost addicted to enemas, like they do them so frequently that they end up not being able to have regular bowel movements without it. Luis is asking, what supplements would you suggest for IBS? So before I suggest supplements, Louisa, I would suggest a gluten-free diet. I mean, hands down. I mean, even the Mayo Clinic is now saying this, that most cases of IBS are actually gluten-induced. So if you're not eating on a gluten-free diet, you might consider that first to save you a ton of money in supplements, because if going gluten-free resolves your IBS, problem solved, no supplements needed. Now, beyond that, there are certain supplements that can be very helpful and supportive depending on what kind of IBS you have, because remember, there's different varieties of it. There's IBS with a constipation type of IBS, and then there's also like a loose bowel or diarrhea type of IBS. So the different kinds of supplements that you would take would also kind of depend on which form of IBS that you're struggling with. But I would start with a gluten-free diet change first, because most of the time supplements for IBS have a short effect, meaning you can take a supplement and it might help for a short window, like a week or 2 weeks, but then your body will adapt and then it will stop working if you don't figure out why the IBS exists. The number one walkaway is not what can I take to mask my symptoms, but it's what is the primary underlying reason as to why my symptoms exist. And if you can figure that out, you know, that will take you far in your health. Question, so Histacyst supports histamine release. No, Histacyst supports histamine stabilization, so it supports the opposite, which is it doesn't make you release more histamine, it stabilizes the membrane around your mast cells so that they're not over aggressively releasing histamine, just to be clear, Claudia. When do you start taking NAC for immune system? Year-round? You can, but I generally don't personally. If I want to take NAC, I'll take anytime I'm getting ready to go fly. So 2 weeks away from getting on an airplane, I will take NAC for that 2 weeks, and I'll take it while I'm on the plane, and I'll take it for a week until I get, a week when I get back. But if I'm just trying to do generalized immune support for cold and flu season, again, I would start sometime in September, and I would just start on a maintenance dose of about 1,000 milligrams. You don't have to take the therapeutic dose, the 2,000 plus milligram, and you can just take that through the winter months, but you don't necessarily have to take it year round. Now, what some people find with NAC is that it's so wonderfully helpful because maybe they have allergies, maybe they have springtime allergies, or maybe they have a pre-existing asthma situation and they find that NAC actually helps them use their steroid inhaler less, or helps them have less flares. And so some people stay on it year-round for that reason. I love NAC for that reason. It's one of the ways that we kind of help people when they're changing their diet and they're trying to figure out, how can I stop taking some of these medications? How can I work with my doctor to start diminishing the medication load? It's one of the things that we like to use, NAC, vitamin C, and quercetin, to help people wean back when they're trying to slow down their steroid use. Thank you. I've been diagnosed with prostate cancer and consequentially bone cancer. I would assume that you had metastasis. Is there supplement and foods to replace or augment seemingly dangerous bone densifying. So I'm not sure I understand your question, Mike. They're wanting to put you on a bone drug like a bisphosphonate, and you're looking for an alternative nutritionally, or I'm not sure I understand your question. I'm going to assume that that's what you mean. If you're looking for like just how can you support your bone nutritionally, we have something called a bone box, which is a mixture of many, many different nutrients that will help to not only support the mineralization of bone, but also support the collagen matrix formation of bone, because bone is more than calcium. There are several nutrients involved with the formation of it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but if it doesn't, give me better clarity and I'll come back around to it. Is benfotiamine considered fat soluble in the sense that you can become toxic from it, or do you have to monitor levels? I've not yet seen a case of benfotiamine toxicity. I think it just depends, Doug, on how much also a person is taking. Generally speaking, I'm speaking both from research studies, but also from my experience in using it clinically. 300 milligrams a day is very well tolerated. I think what happens to some people, maybe they're going above and beyond that 300 milligrams into super high doses, and some of them do have the potential for negative consequences or symptoms. So you've got to be careful if you're going above 300 milligrams. But I'd say if you're staying 300 or under, you don't really have to worry about toxicity levels. Is honey good for the body, or is there too much sugar? Problem with honey is quantity. It's not, I mean, there's sugar in honey, there's also sugar in an apple, there's sugar in a lot of things, right? Honey's high fructose, so there is quite a bit of fructose. So some people who don't process fructose well, and this is not uncommon, especially people with a history of gluten intolerance, because the gluten can damage the GI tract and subsequently damage the enzymes, or the production of the enzymes responsible for helping to break down fructose. And this is one of the reasons why the FODMAP diet is popular. FODMAP diets, fructose is a type of FODMAP, so you avoid higher fructose foods to prevent the gas, the bloating, the intestinal discomfort. Now that being said, if you tolerate honey and you don't have a FODMAP problem or a fructose problem, honey's fine, but quantity matters. So keep it reasonable. If you use it occasionally, I don't think there's a big issue, but if you're using honey and you're smattering honey all over everything and you're eating honey at dessert, I think people can overdo it very easily. So, just keep it reasonable.
You want to hit this one before we scroll?
Okay, yeah. Okay, DR, intestinal villi in the small intestine. Can it still recover after 35 years of eating gluten? Okay, almost 2 years gluten-free, still chronically tired. So, okay. So I think the question is, because I'm not 100% sure I understand exactly what you're asking, but I think I have an idea. You have villi in your small intestine, and you've been eating gluten 35 years, and those villi were damaged. And you went gluten-free, and you've been gluten-free for 2 years. And the question, I think, is, does the villi, or can the villi heal? And the answer to that question is yes, they absolutely can, even with 35 years of damage. The concern long-term is going to be, do the villi heal fully and repair fully, or is there enough damage historically that you might have some kind of microscopic scarring of the villi? Now, scarring is healing. Remember, if you get a deep enough cut on your skin, that skin can scar, and that scar won't grow hair, won't secrete oil, and it won't sweat, because it's lost. The functional cells that were there were replaced by scar tissue, and scar tissue, as far as secretions are concerned, is inactive. And the same is true in your GI tract. Remember, many of these cells are specialized cells. They make different digestive enzymes, and they secrete different types of chemicals that help protect and line the coating of the GI tract. So if you have microscopic scarring to some of those cells, the scar tissue will lay down. The villi won't regrow because it's scar tissue, but you won't have subsequent damage. In other words, you're still healing. It's just that there may be small areas of the intestine that are less functional than they used to be because of the scars. But they will heal. The key with gluten-related villus atrophy is you've got to get the gluten out. Where most people fail in the gluten-free diet, research, I learned this because early on in practice, we kept getting what was called gluten-free whiplash in people, where they would go gluten-free. And the first few months, they were just doing fantastically well. They were feeling so much better and doing better. And then what would happen is they would start digressing. Their symptoms would start coming back. They'd start moving backward. And over the course of a few years, as I was cataloging and just being attentive to why this was happening, one of the biggest trends that we saw was the gluten-free food industry. These people that were going initially gluten-free were just eating real healthy, wholesome foods, and then they started to discover the gluten-free food aisle. And so they started to discover all the corn, genetically modified corn and rice and other products that are labeled gluten-free. And they'd start eating a lot of these as staples, and they start going backwards. It's what we call gluten-free whiplash. Actually, we gave it a name because it was so common. And the research backs this up as well, because the average person, they've done studies now that go out as far as 5 years on a gluten-free diet, and find that in some studies, as many as more than 90% of some of these patients will fail to recover or fail to heal. Their villi will not heal. We believe this is because when they're using gluten-free products, there are a lot of problems with gluten-free products. Number one, they're technically not gluten-free. Corn has a type of gluten in it called Casein, which is, in some studies, show is more damaging than wheat gluten. Rice has a type of gluten in it called orzonin, which some studies show causes enterocolitis, or inflammation in the intestine. So these things are not, even though they're labeled gluten-free, technically they're not gluten-free, and this includes oats. Oats is oftentimes labeled gluten-free, but has a type of gluten in it called avidin that many people with gluten reactions will react to glutens in oats, corn, and rice. And so we believe that the gluten-free food industry, which makes most of their substitute foods with those three grains, has created a scenario where many people going on this traditional gluten-free diet will not heal. They will get better, there will be some improvement, and then they will go, either they will plateau or they will start going backwards, and they'll continue to struggle. So if that's you, get off the grain. That's why the name of the book is No Grain, No Pain. Not no gluten, no pain, but no grain, no pain. Now, there are other elements to processed food as well that that can be problematic for people with gluten issues, and one of the biggest is pesticide. Many of these products, remember, a lot of the grains, the way they're harvested today, they're double sprayed with glyphosate. And that glyphosate is a disruptor of the microbiome. It's an antibiotic to the microbiome. It inhibits serotonin production and other pathways. It inhibits manganese, which manganese is a very important nutrient for gut health and for inflammation. So you've got a broad spectrum herbicide that's been used on our food, especially grains, that can contribute to and proliferate gut damage that looks a lot like celiac disease. So that could be an issue as well. And then there are other things in grains beyond gluten even. These gluten-free grains, one of the biggest in corn and rice is mold toxins. And so a lot of people get exposure to mold toxins by consuming excessive grains, even the ones labeled gluten-free. They're being exposed to mold toxins, which can also cause damage. So if you're still struggling and you're on a gluten-free diet, definitely I would urge you to consider following specifically not just a traditional gluten-free diet, but follow No Grain, No Pain. If you don't have a copy of the book, you can get it at Barnes & Noble, you can get it at Amazon, you can check it out at the library. You can also take our Glutenology Masterclass, which breaks it down into even more depth. So if you're a visual learner and less of a reader and more of a visual, you can go and you can sign up for our Masterclass. It's absolutely free. We have it available for free for anyone who wants to take it. Can we put the link up for that? It's glutenology.net/registration. So you can certainly take that and just get the depth of knowledge about other things beyond what I just talked about that you could do to improve your outcomes, because if you're doing it right, you shouldn't still be struggling. So if you're still struggling, that means there's something you're missing, and you want to get that something figured out. And that class could be a core piece for you to really overcome your struggle. Yeah. So on that note, Karen says, I went to Italy last week and ate pasta and had no stomach issues or GERD. It's again, some people are not gluten sensitive. Some people are reacting to glyphosate. And so, both could be true. A person could be gluten sensitive but also react to glyphosate. A person could just be reacting to glyphosate. I think a lot of people try to blame gluten sensitivity on glyphosate, but remember that celiac disease, the earliest known medical record of celiac disease is 2000 BC. So it's been around a long time. It's been around a lot longer than glyphosate. And, more than 1% of the population has celiac disease. And so that is even before the advent or use of glyphosate. So again, it's not always just glyphosate. I know some people, really want to move in that direction and think of it in that direction. And I would argue that some of them are right, but many of them are gluten sensitive, and they're not doing themselves any favors by eating grains from other regions, because they're still gluten sensitive. At the end of the day, they're still going to have a problem. Are chronic swallowing issues a neurological problem? They can be. Certainly, you have nerve innervation that feeds the swallowing mechanism, the reflex there, so it absolutely can be. I mean, what I would say, if you're struggling with swallowing and you're high strung and you're super stressed, and maybe even if you have a type A personality where you tend to just worry more, this is a scenario we see a lot of people have where they become sympathetic dominant. And so when you're in sympathetic dominance, it's very, very hard. Your GI tract will actually start to rebel. And so swallowing becomes more difficult. Digesting your food becomes more difficult. Sleeping becomes more difficult. So doing things to support parasympathetic tone become very important. And there are a lot of things that can be done. Prayer, meditation. There's something called a float tank, which is in the medical literature, it's also known as sensory deprivation therapy. And you can look those up. Those can be tremendously helpful for people trying to get back parasympathetic tone. But then there are also breathing techniques and breathing practices. I did a video a few months ago with a breathing expert on different breath work patterns and exercises that you can do to engage the parasympathetic nervous system, and you might want to go check that out as well. And then there's also just looking at your day-to-day stress and saying, okay, where are there stressors in my life that I can change, that I have the capacity to change these stressors? And so look at what those are and maybe make some adjustments in your diet or lifestyle. In your experience, can you be sensitive to casein and not gluten? And can moderate amount of garlic consumption cause low hemoglobin? I would say to the garlic question, I've never seen garlic consumption cause low hemoglobin. Possible, although I can just share my experience in that regard. I've never seen a person be reactive to casein who wasn't also reactive to gluten. So although I won't deny that it's possible, I just haven't ever seen it. Liver is very rich in nutrition. I know. Should we eat liver raw or fried? I think you could eat it either way. I think part of it depends on what you're frying it in and how you're frying it. But frying, when you superheat that oil, a lot of the nutrients are heat stable or unstable. So you can destroy some of the nutritional quality if you over fry it. So just keep that in mind. Now, I'd rather see somebody eat fried liver than no liver if they were trying to get the nutritional density of the liver. But as far as raw, eating it raw, I don't eat raw liver. I don't have any experience eating raw liver, so I can't really make a claim that I'm an expert on raw. I'd probably cook it just because there's a lot of potential in liver for there to be parasites. And so one of the things that if you get an animal that has a parasite in the liver and you're eating it raw, there's that risk. And so I would say it's probably a better idea to cook it. One side, I guess my glands on one side have hoarseness, I have jaw pain, fever, fatigue. I have an ENT referral, but could this also be hyperthyroidism? It's possible. And when you go visit your ENT, ask him to run a test on you called TSI. TSI, Joanne, is thyroid stimulating immunoglobulin. So if you have hyperthyroidism, that TSI test can help kind of confirm whether that's happening or not. You also get a medical exam because you want them to palpate, possibly do an ultrasound of your thyroid to get an image to see what's going on. if anything is going on, or whether or not you're just still sick and you have kind of a chronic viral or bacterial issue that, maybe the bulk of your cold went away, but you still have remnants that are keeping you down or creating problems. Let's see. Tammy says, I wake between 1 and 3. Magnesium levels are in healthy range. I have good bedtime routine, not eating after dinner, sleep in a dark, cool room. What else can I do to sleep through the night? Well, if you're waking between 1 and 3, those are the liver hours, Tammy. If we talk about Chinese medicine, castor oil packs to help with liver detoxification. You might also consider something like a liver support formula, like Ultra Liver Detox, and see if that doesn't help improve your sleep. You can also use things like melatonin, although I don't necessarily recommend that long-term indefinitely for sleep. Those are just things you can try, but at the end of the day, if something is happening with your liver, it might not be a bad idea to go and visit your doctor, get an ultrasound of your liver, make sure there's nothing going on with it, and change your bilirubin levels. Those 4 markers can be helpful sometimes at identifying liver issues in people. And then the other thing, if you do any alcohol at all, stop. Because alcohol is another thing, because it damages the liver and stresses the liver. It is a common issue. So even in people that just drink 1 glass of wine a night, we see a lot of that where they're waking up in that 1 to 3 hour. What could be the cause when the sight vision is bad, even though wearing glasses for decades and now getting worse? Having hydrocephalus, could the pressure of that be a cause? Yeah, definitely swelling on your brain can cause vision disturbance depending on where the swelling is. Usually the visual cortex centers are in the back of the head. So if you're swelling, especially back here, that could definitely affect your vision. One of the other things we see very commonly affecting vision in folks that goes unnoticed or goes unchecked is mold. If you've got a mold environment, if you've got mold in your home and don't know it, if mold is growing behind your walls or you have a high level of mold mycotoxin exposure, those are neurotoxins and they can definitely affect your vision. And so one of the things that you might also do, Anne, is do what's called a VCS, a visual contrast sensitivity test. And you can go online and search that, and you can find different places where you can buy those. They're not real expensive, but it may give you an insight as to whether or not there's a potential for mold in your environment. So Bob says, I've recently found your YouTube channel. I struggle with painful hips, a bad knee and large finger joints. Oh, no question. So just a kind word. Thank you, Bob. I appreciate that. Bob says, love your humble, kind, intelligent approach, going gluten-free. Thank you. You're welcome. And thank you for being thankful. The form of, you see here, Denise says, the form of C is best if it's, is that a question or somebody's commentary? I think that's somebody's commentary. Yeah, so the question is, I found inositol in an energy drink, but that doesn't make it really healthy, right? That's correct, because it depends on what else is in the energy drink. I mean, if the energy drink has got other good ingredients, maybe there's not a problem, but most of these energy drinks are basically glorified caffeine delivery systems. So you're basically pushing 2 to 3 cups of coffee in you in a 12-ounce drink that's loaded with artificial flavors, sweeteners, and sugars, and maybe some B vitamins and things like inositol. So beware energy drinks. They're just not something I recommend people do. Should we avoid foods with lectins, tomatoes, and cucumber? Many should. Not everyone needs to, Stella. It depends. If you're following no grain, no pain, you do avoid the nightshades. Tomatoes part of that. As far as all lectins, there's lectin in chicken. There's lectin in a lot of things. It's not that we can't make this claim that all lectins are necessarily bad. They're a natural part of food. But many people don't do well with certain plant lectins that are disruptive of the GI tract. And so nightshades contain a lot of those. Grains contain a lot of those. So the seeds of a lot of plants contain a lot of lectin and other proteins that are what we call plant sensory proteins, which basically they're chemicals in the seed that wreck people's digestion. Do I recommend using a pre and pro? I'm not sure I understand your question, Winston. I'm going to make an assumption about what you mean, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. I think what you're asking me is, do I recommend using a pre and a probiotic? But the question came across as, do you recommend using pre and pro antibiotics? So I recommend prebiotics and probiotics. We have a product called Ultrabiotic Defense, which has both. It's a 1-2 combo. So yeah, I do recommend using them, especially in people that are struggling with GI discomfort. Now, if that wasn't your question, and if what you're really asking me is, do I recommend taking a probiotic before and after using an antibiotic, the answer is also yes. So you could give me clarity, and I can give you better clarity, but I think I answered both potential possibilities there. Yeah, so, okay, so Mela says, is it true that the WHO is challenging people like you that have channels to improve health without pharmaceutical drugs? Yeah, we're getting, the censorship, as you've all seen over the past 3 years, it's been, it's just been, frankly, it's been disgusting. It's one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen. I mean, it rivals Nazi Germany. And a lot of people would be jaw dropped for me to say that, but when you censor information that can save somebody's life for the sake of selling a drug that won't, that's murder. You know, I mean, that could be construed as murder. You know, the act of omission of information that can be life-saving, you know, is, in my opinion, is just as bad as pulling the trigger. So are we being censored? Absolutely, we're being censored. There's no doubt about it. We've had 2 videos taken down in the last month that, you know, ambiguously violated someone's policy somewhere. We're not clear really about what those policies mean, other than that if you disagree with the World Health Organization, that you're somehow invalidated, and that is absolutely happening. So those of you who, you know, don't want censorship, or those of you who want to be able to continue to get information from me and watch my information, there are a few ways that you can go about staying in tune with me should we happen to get shut down on our big channel YouTube. So YouTube is one of our biggest channels, and you know, I can't really complain aside from a couple of censorships. You know, we've been able to broadcast our message to a very large audience, and I'm thankful for that because I know we've impacted a lot of your lives and helped you. With that being said, you know, if you're worried about censorship the same way I am, you can come check us out on some of our other channels. I don't know if we can put maybe just like a post up or a link up to, because we have, those of you who don't know, we're on Spotify. We're on Rumble as well. We're on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. So we're on all the platforms, but some of the platforms that are a little bit more respectful of free speech, you know, Rumble and Spotify, we haven't had any censorship over at those places. So you might encourage, or you might go over there and make sure you're subscribed to our feeds on those platforms. And then, you know, ultimately, those are all platforms I don't own. Those are all platforms that I have no control over. And, you know, maybe one day those will be censored too. I don't know. But if you really don't want to get censored, come visit me at Gluten Free Society. And when you get there, at the bottom, you can give your name and email. And when you do that, you'll be on our email list. And so when we do a video, when we come out with a new video or a new article designed to help you, you know, we send email to people when those are ready and available with the links. And so if you, again, are on that list, you won't be censored, because that list is something that is owned by Gluten Free Society. And so we can guarantee that we can get you the information that way. It's really the only way I can guarantee the information will come to you should the powers that be decide to just completely shut us down and deplatform us on some of these mainstream social media channels. Oh, okay. I see the question now. So somebody was asking earlier about quercetin, but they said glutathione. So the question is there an alternative to quercetin that doesn't have grapefruit seed extract in it? Yeah, you can just get pure quercetin in its pure form without any other added ingredients. I am fighting with chronic Lyme and am curious, what are your best remedies to reduce neuroinflammation and detoxify the toxins? Look, there's not a best remedy because the only remedy for Lyme truly is to deal with the Lyme itself, to deal with the infection. Because if you don't deal with the infection, all the symptoms are not going to go away no matter how many detoxification protocols you put in place. No amount of supplements are going to symptomatically improve the quality of your life until you deal and address with the core issue of chronic Lyme. And here's my experience with chronic Lyme. Most people that I have seen with chronic Lyme, the reason they don't do well if they've gone through treatments, like they've gone through the antibiotic regimens, they've gone through the herbal regimens, and they're still struggling, is because they haven't changed their diet. So you've got it with Lyme. You have to change your diet. You have to get appropriate testing done so that you know that what you're eating isn't killing you, isn't poisoning you, isn't suppressing your immune function or distracting your immune system from doing the work of helping you overcome the Lyme. Because that's the name of the game with Lyme. You have to have an immune system that's strong enough to kick it. But if your immune system is constantly battling what you're putting in your mouth and calling food, then there is no supplement that's going to overcome that. You have to go at it from the perspective of deal with the environmental elements, including food, that are either suppressing or distracting your immune system from helping you win. I have no heat tolerance at all. In other words, you don't tolerate heat. What to do to help with that? Well, it depends on why you're having heat intolerance. I mean, and there are a number of reasons why that can happen. But usually, in my experience with that, it's usually it's either an impact on the nervous system, like an autoimmune reaction in the nervous system that's driving that. So you might want to just get with a good doctor who can help you figure that part out. And just know this, there are 4 triggers for autoimmune disease. So if your heat intolerance is an autoimmune issue, which is real typical of diseases like MS, multiple sclerosis, you've got to look at 4 fundamental triggers. You got to look at food as a trigger, chemical exposures as a trigger, microbes as a trigger, the wrong microbes, or you have to look at vitamins and minerals as a trigger, deficiencies, specifically vitamin and mineral deficiencies. So those 4 areas or categories are all triggers for autoimmune processes. It's my experience that most people don't just have one trigger. They have like a dozen or more triggers that are all working together to create the perfect storm for the immune system to become disruptive. So that's what I would encourage you to investigate. Let's see, I'm 100% carnivore and I've had a significant, and it's had a significant impact on my psoriatic arthritis. Are there any supplements that might help with healing and damage caused from years of high levels of inflammation? Well, if you're on carnivore, specifically, I'd make sure you're getting extra vitamin C, just because there's not much of that in a carnivore diet. And then some carnivore advocates will say, well, you don't need as much vitamin C because of the diet. Because carbohydrates can deplete C. But I've seen a lot of people with carnivore diet history with vitamin C deficiencies. And vitamin C is a very potent anti-inflammatory, and it's like human duct tape. It helps to heal and repair everything. So it would be one thing, just top of mind, that I would encourage you to use. But the other thing I would encourage you to do is get your micronutrient levels tested, because, you know, there are lots of supplements that can help support healing, but they're not really going to be super effective or helpful for you if you don't need more of them, right? So it's just like this. It's with any supplement, with any medicine, there's something called a dose-response curve, meaning some might be helpful. When you get beyond a certain point, it won't be helpful. And when you get beyond a certain point above that, it will sometimes can become detrimental. And this is why, again, I'm an advocate of testing, because if you don't know what you need, then any supplement I could tell you to take just is going to be a generic answer that may or may not help you. But because of the carnivore diet, specifically vitamin C would be a good place to start. L-carnosine eye drops safe to use, and do they really eliminate cataracts? I don't have any experience with L-carnosine eye drops, so hard to give you an answer that is honest and ethical in that regard. As far as whether they eliminate cataracts, I don't know. I haven't read anything about carnosine being capable of doing that, and I haven't seen anything anecdotally about it either, so sorry I couldn't be more helpful. NAD plus IV. Are you asking whether or not you should take NAD as IV? I don't. I think it very much depends on the person's situation. I'm more a fan of oral supplementation than I am of IV supplementation, simply because that's how the body naturally receives it. Plus, when you get IVs, you puncture the skin and you basically put the immune system at risk for certain problems. So unless you're really, really sick and you need IV nutrition in a big way because you're severely malnourished, I'm not a huge fan of IV as a general course. So Lori says, I had no idea that daily antihistamines were not good for my immune health. I tried to stop and had terrible itching. Is that normal? No, it's not. It means you're having an allergic reaction to something. But sometimes when people try to get off cold turkey antihistamines, if they've been on them for a really long time, they can get a rebound histamine response. So Lori, it might be helpful for you, if you're taking a prescription, to ask your doctor to change your dose and just kind of wean down slowly off of it while using something like Histasis to support your weaning effect. And that's probably where I would recommend that you start. But you're still reacting to something, so there may be something that you're eating that's causing an excessive histamine response, so it might not be a bad idea as well to get food sensitivity testing done. Because a lot of people, they're eating foods they're reacting to, but they've been told they have environmental allergens. I see this all the time in my practice, where a person's gone to their allergy doctor and been told the standard: you're allergic to dust and cockroach dander, and you're allergic to ragweed, or this tree pollen, or that flower, or whatever it might be. And then we test their food, and they're actually reacting to 5 of their favorite foods. And so when they quit eating those foods, their environmental triggers completely go away and they no longer have allergies. Like, that's a very common outcome when you understand how to change your diet. So I would look toward dietary triggers, things that are, again, overworking your immune system and preventing it from being able to give you its best in terms of external outdoor environmental allergens. Would be the cause of pain in the lower left side? If you're talking about the flank, lower left side leg, lower left side of the abdomen, hard to give you an answer. I assume you mean abdomen, so I'll answer it that way. So lower left side of the abdomen, followed by nausea. That could be a lot of things. It could be an intestinal infection, so you probably want to get that checked out. It could be that you have inflammation in your intestine. A lot of different foods for many people will cause left lower flank pain, leading to intestinal pain and discomfort and nausea. We see that with, like example, we see that with gluten all the time. So get food checked out, and also go get checked out with your doc, especially if you're running any kind of fever or really feeling under the weather. You may have an infection that needs to be looked at a little bit more closely. Do you carry a multivitamin that does not have copper? No, we don't. We don't carry one that's copper free. How long does it take eczema to go away? It depends on what's causing it. It won't go away if you're continually exposing yourself to the things that are triggering it. And so with eczema, that's also, my experience, is usually food induced. Dairy, sugar, gluten are the 3 very common eczema triggers. We also see yeast overgrowth causing eczema, so you might ask your doctor to check you for yeast issues. But once you know what's triggering it and you deal with those things, you know, it can go away within a few months. I mean, it doesn't take a tremendously long time. Can you suggest something for a 4-year-old who, remember, vitamin C is a natural antihistamine. And, you know, depending on your 4-year-old and the diet that he or she eats, you know, a lot of kids don't get anywhere near enough vitamin C. And so that would be just a low-hanging, really simple thing that you could apply to the diet right away and see if that works. If it doesn't, come back and ask the question again, and I can give you some more. Okay, recently got test results back for Hashimoto's. I live in rural America and my doc knows everything and it's only hereditary according to the doctor, your Hashimoto's. Hashimoto's not hereditary, it's not a genetic disease at all. I mean, go back 100 years, it hardly ever existed. We didn't see this illness. It's environmental for sure. Do you know where there's a cheap, reliable lab where I can do the right tests so I can fix the cause of my autoimmune attack? Well, you can use Gluten-Free Society. We do nutritional testing and we do food sensitivity and gluten testing, and that might be a good place for you to start. But as far as like thyroid testing directly, that's something we encourage you to visit your doctor about. Or you can do a direct-to-consumer lab. We don't do direct-to-consumer medical lab. We do direct-to-consumer food and gluten and nutrition labs. I'd say if you're really struggling, you need to work with somebody. Even living in rural America, work with somebody remotely. You know, you can call us, call my office. But if you're doing all the right things that you know to do and you're still struggling, you need to. It's no longer a do-it-yourself at-home project, and you need to get help. Let's see, a follow-up question. Gluten and dairy sensitive. How do I obtain Virid? Do we put a link up for Virid, Mel?
No, not yet.
Okay, we'll put a link up for you, Cam, on that. Is it a good idea to use a NAC nebulizer? In other words, nebulize through a nebulizing machine to put NAC in that and to inhale it directly. Some doctors actually use NAC and or glutathione in nebulizers. Some doctors prescribe that to their patients who have lung problems, you know, so again, upper respiratory infection or additionally like asthma. But I don't, you know, I would say if you don't have a problem like that per se, then nebulizing it is not anything I really would encourage you to do. Are parasites a problem? Yeah, they can be, but not for everyone. I think some people are out there saying everyone has a parasite. I don't agree with that. I haven't seen that to be the case either. I see lots of people get healthy without having to do parasite cleanses or worry about parasites. Now, that being said, parasites are definitely a problem for many people. I mean, they're not as esoteric of an issue as many doctors would claim. I mean, most doctors in the U.S. say that parasites are a third world problem and not a first world problem, but I would argue that's not at all true. We do see them on a pretty frequent basis. It's just not everyone has them to the level that they're sick as a result of it. Let's see here. Can I ask how it is that you have so much energy? Been following your advice on diet to the T for years. What else can us mortals do? Like, my energy comes from you guys. I think if you're doing look, there's 6 fundamentals. There's 6 non-negotiable fundamentals of good health. And if you practice these 6 things and you keep these 6 things top of mind, you're going to take yourself a long way, right? Both physically, functionally, energetically. And what are they? It's eat real food. You know, put the processed crap down. Even the gluten-free, even the grain-free processed crap. Quit eating it. I don't eat processed. I eat real food. Number 2. Go to bed on time. bedtime for me is a schedule. I go to bed every night. I'm in bed by 9 o'clock in the winter. I'm in bed 9:30 in the summer because it stays lighter later. But that's not negotiable for me. Energy comes with rest. It's a consequence of rest. Number 3, exercise like your life depended on it. I mean, don't cut that part out. So many people, they'll do the diet change, but then they won't go take care of themselves physically. And your exercise really should consist of 3 major components. You should have some degree of strength training, you should have some degree of flexibility training, and you should have some degree of cardiovascular training as part of your regular week. And if that's not on your schedule, you need to make it happen as soon as possible, because if it's not on your schedule, it won't happen. Most people say, I'm going to exercise this afternoon, and then this afternoon comes, and then something else is distraction. Something else gets in the way. So every morning, 5:30, I'm up, I'm in the gym, and I've got a protocol and a program ready to go. So that's a non-negotiable for me. Number 4, clean air. Number 5 is clean water. And number 6 is sunshine. The sun heals. Everybody's buying all these fancy lamps and lights, to get therapy lights, but you got all the therapy light you need when you go outside, and it's free. It won't cost you thousands of dollars. You just have to make the effort to go outside. So many people will say, I can't handle the heat, or I can't handle being outside. Figure it out. You can't not handle not getting it, right? Because part of the reason most people get sick is a lack of energetics, because we actually are batteries, and the sun is a recharger of the battery of our human body. Remember that water, we are 70% water, and that water inside of us gets charged by the sun. That energy, there's an energy from that. And so if you're not partaking in that, then you're losing out on a ton of energy that you could otherwise have. And so part of my schedule is every morning after I get up, go work out, come home, spend some time with my family. And before I head into the practice, I will sit outside, usually at least 30 minutes, and I will just sit in the sun. And that usually in the morning, it's not too hot, and I can still get that good sun, and I can make lots of vitamin D, make lots of melatonin so that I'm ready to sleep and heal and repair. But those things, if they're not on the top of your priority list in your life, you're going to find you're struggling in some way, because they're not negotiable. When I say they're not negotiable, it doesn't mean that I'm right and you're wrong. What it simply means is you can't negotiate with fundamentals of what it takes to be healthy. If you try, you pay the price of not being healthy. So if you're doing those 6 things consistently day in and day out, and you're still low energy, or you're still having a problem, that's when you dig deeper. That's when you come to see somebody like me, who is going to take you through a journey of biochemistry investigation into what are your uniquenesses, that if you understood them, you could apply them in your life in a unique way, so that you could optimize your body's health and functionality by doing what your body needs you to do. So that's how. And then I'll follow that up with just one other thing, which is the psychological component. Everything I just talked about were things and behaviors that you could have, but there's another psychological component to this. I love what I do, and I think a lot of people will get energy when they're doing what they love. I mean, how many of you work a job that you don't like, or just kind of push through a day and do a bunch of things you don't really want to do, or are forced to do things that you don't like to do? That is an energy theft, right? That's an energy vampire. And so if you're in that type of situation, and don't get me wrong, I love what I do today, but if you watch my 50th anniversary video, where I just talked about my life from my early 20s all the way up to now, I used to do work that I hated. I was miserable. I had low energy. I was doing things I didn't want to do. I hadn't figured out what I wanted to do, and I wasn't passionate about anything that I was doing. And that is something I would encourage everyone to find, right? Because if you can tap into what you're passionate about, and you can do what you love every day, there's an energy to that, and there's a satisfaction in life to that. There's a sense of purpose. There's a sense of accomplishment when you can tap into that. And so if you haven't yet tapped into that, create your strategy. It's like there's no better time than to get started today on creating the life and the energy that you want to have. But nothing is free, and nothing comes easy. You have to have strategy, and you have to be able to implement things consistently over time. So I hope that's helpful for you, and I hope you can take that information and run with it. And I hope next time maybe you have a little bit more energy when you're tuning in. How to get rid of parasites cheaply and naturally. I have a formula, Denise, called Intestinal Defense that we use it with. It's fine. I use it every month. We use it with our family, but also with our animals. I have a farm, and so we have cows and pigs, and we deworm them once a month. But that's the way I would do it anyway. Is using something like that. Let's see. You can go down a little bit for me. What do you recommend everyone has in their home for emergency medicine? That's a great question. Did we do a bit on that? I think we did an emergency show. We'll see if we can find that emergency show and post a link for you, because there's a whole bunch of things, but just kind of very simply, I recommend probiotics. I recommend a white willow. So like white willow as an herb is basically where aspirin comes from. So it's a blood thinner. It's also a natural pain reliever. It can work really well should you need it if somebody gets injured in a tight spot for home emergency. I recommend hydrogen peroxide. I recommend alcohol. I recommend a sewing kit. Should you need to put stitches in somebody. A full-blown emergency, no doctors around, and somebody has a problem, I'd recommend a tourniquet. These are all just kind of common sense things, but beyond that, we'll see if we can't find that link and put it up for you.
I just did.
Oh, there it is. It's there. Does 1 gram of ultra collagen peptide from ultra collagen count as 1 gram of protein when counting grams of protein? Yes. What are your thoughts on nattokinase for clogged arteries and also a substitute for blood thinners? I think nattokinase is a great blood thinner naturally, but if you're going to do that and not use a blood thinner that's prescribed for you by your doctor, you really want to have a conversation with your doctor about monitoring your blood viscosity and monitoring things like your prothrombin time, your D-dimer, your fibrinogen. These are all things that can be monitored to make sure that you're hitting the right mark with blood thinness. Now, that being said, I have a different opinion altogether on trying to thin the blood out than probably most doctors do. My opinion of it is you don't need to thin your blood. You need to eat well so that your blood is not inflamed. People that have thick blood and that have an increased risk of stroke and heart attack their risks are because they're eating an inflammatory diet that causes increased platelet aggregation and clotting of their blood. So they're more prone to that. So taking blood thinners is an artificial way to bypass a bad diet and bad behavior. So really change your behavior, have your blood viscosity markers checked regularly, and if they're normal and they're coming down, another thing you can do just a visual is when you're getting your blood drawn, when they put that needle in, if it takes 10 minutes to get a vial of blood out of your arm, your blood's too thick. But if that blood flows right out of your arm, your blood, at least the appearance of your blood is thin, and that's a good thing. That's something you can pay attention to. Just on the common sense level. Do you have a video on how to reverse sympathetic nervous system domination? No, but I think we have one on stress. There's a whole show on stress, which has a lot of the information in it, Eric. So we'll see if we can find it and put a link for you. So Lita says, I can't find quercetin in the stores. I have to order it on Amazon. I buy the combo with bromelain in the store for my husband. It seems the store shelves are getting less product space. Go to Gluten Free Society, Lita. Let me put up a link to Ultra Q. Go buy Ultra Q, or you can, it's got the most powerful quercetin you'll ever find is in Ultra Q, and we use pomegranate with it to enhance its absorption fourfold, so it's very powerful. We also have quercetin in our Histassist, which I was talking about earlier, and you can certainly, again, you can check that product out as well, depending on what you're using quercetin for. Where are we at here?
I'm fine, jumped on me here. Okay, so that's one you just answered.
Okay, okay. Chiming in from Ohio, love to watch your videos. Awesome. Thanks for tuning in, Rose. I like this one. Happened to be listening while grabbing vitamin D on an outdoor jog. Love that. Yeah, I'd make use of the technologies that we have, right? Wondering if eliminating fluoride and BPAs from my drinking water make a difference to health. Yeah, absolutely. Part of one of the shows in our queue that I'm going to be doing this year is fluoride toxicity. So get that fluoride out. I mean, if you're using fluoridated mouthwash or toothpaste, or you're putting fluoride trays in your mouth when you go to the dentist, know that people that use fluoride have lower IQs. Fluoride is a neurotoxin. The history behind how fluoridation occurred in the United States is a very interesting history. And I certainly would recommend that you look into that too. But yeah, getting rid of fluoride and BPAs is a smart move. Plastics showing up in the water bottles due to breakdown of plastic and heat where it may be stored for long times before shipping. Maybe water purifier. Try page. Yeah. So if I'm looking at water, like a reserve water, if you guys are thinking about emergency water, we're talking about an emergency. So emergency water is not the same thing as your daily water. If you're looking at emergency storage for water, it's better to have water in plastic than to have no water. And again, it's emergency. Now you can buy gallon jugs, glass jugs, and we have some of those as well where we store. But I mean, a gallon, for a family doesn't take you an awful long way. So you'd have to have quite a few of those. You can also buy 5-gallon glass jugs, but again, depending on how much storage space you have, etc. I don't know if I answered that question, but as far as water filtration is concerned, I just recommend that you filter your water. I'd rather see somebody filter their city water with a good RO filter than to drink from plastic water bottles. Even if the water in the plastic bottle came from a healthy source, the leaching of plastic, how long that bottle sat on a hot boat shipping across the ocean or in a warehouse somewhere, those plastics end up in the water. And now even, we got even more plastics showing up now because everybody, well, for the past 3 years was, throwing masks all over and polluting with masks. I mean, that's the other consequence of that whole mess is, all the perfluoroalkyl substances and plastics and forever chemicals that are now showing up in our landfills and in our water as a result of that fear porn that was being pushed down so many people's throats. At hives, let's see, where's it? Let's go down a little bit. Oh, here we go. Would like to know if you think taking vitamin D per day with vitamin K2 is good for Crohn's. It is, especially if you're deficient. So 10,000 units of vitamin D a day is a really safe amount unless you have pre-existing kidney damage, and then you want to check with your doctor. But there's nothing wrong with doing that. It may not, it may not resolve a Crohn's situation, but if you're low in that, especially, is something that could be beneficial. So I would look into it. But if you've got Crohn's that's not being controlled, you certainly want to look at diet change. Home air filters. What recommendations would you have for home air filters? A good ultra-fine HEPA filter. There are a number of good brands. Air Doctor's one I'm partial to. I actually own a couple of them. And I don't know if we have a link for that we can put up for Sandy. And we go down on the right too. Okay, that's good.
Hold on, jumped again. There
Okay, let's see here. Let me go down a little more. Is that?
To the bottom, yeah.
Question on just a histosys question. Where do you get it? I think we posted a link to that in the feed that you can check out.
Mostly comments.
All right, a lot of comments today. I'm not going to read everyone's comments here, but I think we answered that one.
That's the bottom over here.
Okay. Wow, did we get them all? I think maybe we got them all. Well, we got all the ones I could see. We had some problems in our comment feed. So if any of you asked a question that it didn't get answered, it wasn't because I was trying to ignore you. Oh, okay, one more, we'll wrap it up here. Should we be concerned about FEMA emergency room emergency warning on October 4th due to 5G? Yeah, I think 5G, so I got an email from a colleague of mine overseas this morning on, I think it was the Apple iPhone 12 phone, basically being recalled in France because it emits too much radiation. And so we're starting to see the impacts and the effects of EMF because so many people have devices and so many devices and towers and antennas are up, and so that we're seeing an exponential rise or increase in EMF. And a lot of people think it's benign because you can't see it, but you know, those of you that have that in your mind as just because you can't see it means it's not hurtful. Remember Madame Curie, the woman who basically discovered X-rays and worked with X-rays. She actually died because she was radiated to such a great degree from X-rays that you cannot see. And these millimeter wavelengths that are being emitted by these phones are definitely can be problematic. And you do want to have a strategy in your life to minimize your exposure. I mean, you shouldn't be sitting in front of a Wi-Fi device all day long. So you want to have strategies around mitigating that. We like to turn ours off, and I hardwire all my equipment so that at least we're mitigating or minimizing the exposure from the aerial Wi-Fi. But yeah, I would be concerned by that. I don't know if that answers your question. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up because I'm 30 minutes over my time. Anyway, I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you all. I know your time is every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Come join us. And then every Thursday at 12:30 for live Q&A. So those of you that maybe are new today, come back next week. If you got more questions, we're here for you. We're here to support you in your natural health. And freesociety.org. Just sign up for the email list there. When you do that, that makes it possible for us to communicate to you if the powers that be decide they want to shut the channel off for whatever reason they deem appropriate, you know, whatever flavor of the month they deem appropriate. Anyway, have a fantastic weekend. We'll see you next week.